Joining me now is the former head of the CIA, John Brennan. Mr. Brennan, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning, Chuck. Thanks for having me on.
The president also tweeted a few other things this morning, specifically about the intel community. I want to start off by getting you to respond to these. He tweeted, "Putin and I discussed forming an impenetrable cybersecurity unit so that election hacking and many other negative things will be guarded and safe. Questions were asked about why the CIA and FBI had to ask the DNC 13 times for their server and were rejected. Still don't have it. Fake news said 17 intel agencies when actually 4 had to apologize. Why did Obama do nothing when he had info before the election?" All right, there's a lot to unpack in here, but let's start with, do you interpret this as President Trump taking the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the America's intelligence community?
Well, it certainly indicates he doesn't take the word of the intelligence community, and that's what he's been doing repeatedly in terms of his public comments. 2 days before the G20 summit in Warsaw, he continued to question the intelligence community's high-confidence assessment that Russia interfered in the election. He also raised questions about the integrity and capabilities of the U.S. intelligence community. And so, therefore, I seriously question whether or not Mr. Putin heard from Mr. Trump what he needed to about the assault on our democratic institutions of the election.
You seemed particularly upset about him questioning the intelligence community on foreign soil. What's wrong? He brought up the Iraq WMD issue. What's wrong with him expressing public skepticism?
Well, first of all, it shows that I don't think he demonstrates good negotiating skills when it comes to Mr. Putin. Again, 2 days before in Warsaw, he gives Mr. Putin the opportunity to point to the failures of U.S. intelligence. To me, I think he ceded that ground. And also, right before he met with Mr. Putin and talked with him at some length, which I'm glad he did, he said it's an honor to meet President Putin. An honor to meet the individual who carried out the assault against our election. To me, it was a dishonorable thing to say.
Let me unpack something else he said in here, too. He says questions were asked about why the CIA and FBI had to ask the DNC 13 times for their server and were rejected. It's new to me about the CIA.
It's new to me as well. If the CIA would ever ask for something like that. We have no domestic intelligence authorities. That's what the FBI does. And Mr. Trump has pointed to the CIA asking DNC and then Mr. Podesta. That is absolutely wrong.
You know, one of the things you said in your hearing, and I want to go into this, is you made a comment about treason. Let me play it here and then get you to explain it further on the other side.
Frequently, individuals who go along that treasonous path do not even realize they're along that path until it gets to be a bit too late.
All right. With so many stories about various meetings with Russians, there's a new one this morning about, and I think the Trump campaign response essentially is they didn't know this Russian lawyer's background with the Kremlin, that it was unwitting. Is that what you're referring to? Was it meetings like that of the information your folks collected at the CIA that raised your suspicions?
I will give the Russian intelligence services their due. They are capable and aggressive intelligence services. They will do whatever they can to be able to get information that they need, in their view, for their national security. And so they'll interact with people and frequently play people. And a lot of times individuals who are interacting with Russians, not even Russians, others that the Russian intelligence services are using, are being exploited for Russian intelligence purposes. So again, the process of committing treason against one's country frequently takes place in an unwitting fashion in the early stages.
And what I'm curious about that is what role do you believe the intelligence community should play when you first see it? If you see that there is somebody that could be compromised and they don't know it, do you go and warn these folks? Do you say, hey, be careful with this relationship? Or do you what is that line there? I mean, isn't there a point where you want to warn an American, hey, don't do business with them?
There are a lot of unique circumstances that will determine how we proceed. If we believe that the Russians are seeking to exploit an individual, we will work with the FBI, making sure the FBI is aware of this. There may be other parts of this puzzle that we're unaware of. And so we have an obligation, because of our very important counterintelligence responsibilities, to make sure the FBI is informed about all of these possibly suspicious counterintelligence concerns that we have.
When you were collecting this data at the time, and you were raising alarm bells, we now know back in, I believe it's June now of 2016, a little bit before I think the FBI was told. Why is it in hindsight did it seem it took a while for the rest of the intelligence community to come around to your assessment?
We were working very closely with the FBI as well as with NSA. As you can understand, there are some very, very sensitive source of methods involved. And so we had to be particularly careful about how we handled this information, who we talked to. I went down and spoke to the officials of the White House and the President about it. I spoke to Jim Comey as well. And so what we need to do is to make sure that as an ongoing investigation is moving forward, we don't want to do anything at all that could compromise the ability of the Bureau as well as CIA and the rest of the intelligence community to collect additional information. So it has to be handled very carefully.
When it was finally exposed and you met with folks and there was a debate about what to do, obviously there's been a TikTok, and one of the infamous quotes out there in the Washington Post TikTok on what happened in the end of the Obama term. And this is what one anonymous Obama official said. "It is the hardest thing about my entire time in government to defend," said a former senior Obama administration official involved in White House deliberations on Russia. "I feel like we sort of choked." The idea is that enough wasn't done before the election, and I understand the political impact of that, but there's been complaints that enough wasn't done after the election. What do you say to that? Did you choke?
That was a really brave comment by an anonymous source. They should be willing to say that on the record, first of all. No, I don't believe that the Obama administration choked. I think we can look at the actions that were taken prior to the election and after the election. I confronted my main Russian counterpart on August 4th and told him, if you go down this road, it's going to have serious consequences, not only for the bilateral relationship, but for our ability to work with Russia on any issue, because it is an assault on our democracy. President Obama confronted President Putin in September. Jim Clapper and Jay Johnson announced publicly in October about Russian efforts. So after we did that, I wonder whether or not the Russians then took a step back and said, wait a minute now, we're not going to be as aggressive as we may have been otherwise.
Did you see evidence of that?
Well, I didn't see evidence that they continued to do some of the things that we were concerned about, such as manipulating election tallies and other types of things. They were mapping the architecture of a lot of the state systems, so they could have done more. They didn't do more. I don't know whether or not the things that we did vis-a-vis the Russians had an impact on them in terms of not pursuing it.
Let me ask about the issue of leaks. Obviously, the Trump administration believes the leak issue is tantamount to this, that it's sort of that the leaks are unfair. Number one, there's been some studies that there are more leaks coming out of this White House, this national security team than we've ever seen before. But some of it, according to the Trump administration, is coming from career folks. Some of it, they blame you for some of these leaks. First of all, how damaging are these leaks?
Well, there are two different types of leaks. One type is revealing very sensitive classified information. They are appalling. They need to stop, they need to be investigated, and people need to be held to account. But then there are also leaks about conversations and internal White House intrigue. That is something that I think the White House is going to have to get control of. But clearly, as you point out, I think there's a lot that's hemorrhaging out from this administration.
How much of it is, and let me ask you your line, when you is there information that's currently classified about this investigation that you think should be put into the public record that isn't yet?
I am deferring to Bob Mueller, who has impeccable credentials as far as doing this investigation in the best way possible, to determine exactly how the information related to this investigation should be coming out publicly. Any ongoing investigation, the Bureau and those investigators are going to be very careful about exposing information that could compromise their ability to gain additional information.
You brought up the special counsel Bob Mueller. Have you been interviewed by him yet?
No, I have not.
Are you going to be? Is it scheduled?
I don't know. I haven't been contacted.
All right. John Brennan, I'm going to leave it there. Appreciate you coming on.
Okay, thank you, Chuck.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.